Good afternoon, everyone. As we discuss nationalism in India, Mahatma Gandhi has started two important movement, non-cooperation and civil disobedience movement. Civil disobedience movement, we talk about the Dandi March, we talk about the movement from Peshawar, and finally we talk about the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Later on, after the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, civil disobedience movement was called off. Then Gandhiji went for the roundtable conference in London and nothing was happened, no agreement was signed over there. So Gandhiji came and he again started the civil disobedience movement. But this time, as people didn't support to the Gandhiji, the movement was called off. And 1934, the movement was called off. So we have to discuss up to here. Now the two modules that we are going to discuss about, the number one, module number 4, that we are going to discuss about the meaning of the movement for the different groups and the limits of civil disobedience movement. So here we are going to talk about the 5 different groups and how they were participated in civil disobedience movement, and apart from that we will also discuss about the two groups who talk about or who did not participate in the civil disobedience movement. So first group, that is we call as a rich peasants. Now rich peasants, they were supporting to the civil disobedience movement because they were fighting against the high revenue. As we know that Britishers were collecting the revenue or tax from the Indian government, British government were collecting the tax from the Indian farmer, and the tax was very high. So it was very problematic for rich peasants. Like if you go to the countryside, there's some rich peasant community like Patidar of Gujarat, Jats of Uttar Pradesh, they were very active in this movement. The reason, because they were very rich and the revenue or tax was collected by the British government which was very high. So that rich peasants, they enthusiastically they supported to the civil disobedience movement. The reason, they believe if the Gandhiji gets success, they will be free from the high revenue. But they were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931 without the revenue rate being revised. If you remember that Gandhiji called off the movement in 1931 when Gandhiji signed the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, and when the pact was signed, the movement was called off. But at that time there was no revenue was changed. So that's the reason rich peasants, they lost the support of Mahatma Gandhi, and when Gandhiji relaunched the civil disobedience movement second time, so the people did not support it to the Mahatma Gandhi. Second group, that is we call as a poor peasants, that is no rent movement. Now poor peasants, they were fighting against the British government because they want to remove from the rent. They felt, they poor peasants, they found very difficult to pay the rent. They felt difficult to pay the rent to the landlord. Now you know the land was belongs to the landlord only. Okay, so they were giving to the landless farmers, land were given to the landless farmers, but they were collecting very high rent, and it was very difficult for poor peasants to pay the rent. So they joined the variety of radical movements, often led by socialist and communist, in hope they would not have to pay the rent any further. So poor peasants, they supported to the Gandhiji in the civil disobedience movement because they were feeling that if Gandhi gets success, they would be free from this type of problem. The third group, that is called as a non-participation of industrial worker. The majority of industrial class, they did not participated in the civil disobedience movement because they were not happy with the Mahatma Gandhi. You know that Mahatma Gandhi, he called off the movement, non-cooperation movement. Yeah, the reason that was Gandhiji, in Chori Chora, the large number of people were killed, and 22 police officers were killed, and they burn out the police station also. So Gandhiji decided to call off the movement. Now question arises, why it was need to call off the movement? Yes, there was no need to call off the movement, and at that time the workers, they were without the work, they were without the work for approximately for 11 months, and it was very difficult for the farmer or for the workers to survive. And that's the reason when the Gandhiji launched the civil disobedience movement, the workers, industrial workers, they did not support it to the Mahatma Gandhi. So we discuss about the three group: rich peasants, poor peasants, and industrial worker. The fourth group, that is we call as a industrialist, industrial owner. They were fighting against the colonial restriction on the business. They were opposing the British government because British government has restricted their business. Merchants and industrialists wanted a protection against the import of foreign goods, and that's the reason they have formed Indian Industries and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we call as FICCI, in 1927. By forming these two institutions, they tried to united all the Indian merchants and industrial owners so they can fight against the British government, against the high colony, high rent, high against the high restriction, against the restriction on the business. And this association were led by the industrialist owner like G.D. Birla, Purushottam Das, Thakur Das. When the civil disobedience movement was launched, they fully supported. Supported financially, they supported morally, socially, physically. They fully supported to the Mahatma Gandhi when civil disobedience movement was started. And most of the businessmen were hoped that Swaraj would end the colonial restriction on business and industry would grow. Like industrial owners were thinking, if Swaraj will we get the Swaraj, then it is very easy. Like we can expand our business. There will be no restriction on industry. There will be no restriction on business. So we can expand. But after the second roundtable conference, the second roundtable conference held in England, so after the second roundtable conference, the business group, they thought now Gandhiji cannot able to fight out against the Britishers, and without reason he is switching off or he is calling off the movement. So after the second roundtable conference, then when the second phase of civil disobedience movement started, the Gandhiji did not get the support from the industrial owner. And the last group we call as a women. The women participated in large number, especially in urban area. The women came from the high class families. In rural area, women came from the rich peasants household. Now, what was the reason behind of participating of women? The women were inspired by Gandhiji's call and they began to see the service to the nation as their sacred duties. They thought the, they thought the women were inspired by Gandhiji's call. They began to see the service to the nation as their sacred duty. Now, women they were fighting, women they were supporting Mahatma Gandhi. The reason they thought if we get the success, then the women's life, women's conditions will be improved. They will get the equal status in the society, and that's the reason women also took part in the civil disobedience movement. So this is the five group who took part in the civil disobedience movement. Now let us talk about the limits of civil disobedience movement. Now see, not all social groups were participated or moved with the concept of Swaraj. Some of the groups they did not want to take part in the civil disobedience or in Swaraj. There were two groups who did not take part. Number one, that is called as untouchable. One such group was untouchable who began to call themselves as a Dalit nearby 1930s. And the second important group, that was a Muslim, also could not relate to this movement. So as I discussed, like five group, they supported to the Mahatma Gandhi and later on they didn't support in the second round. But two groups were there, that is Dalits we call as untouchable and Muslim. They were not supporting to the Mahatma Gandhi from second or first civil disobedience. When the first time civil disobedience movement launched, they did not support it to the Mahatma Gandhi. Now let's see why untouchables were not supporting. Now from long period of time, the Congress had ignored the Dalits because they were having a fear that if they will support to the Dalit, they may lose support from Sanatanis. Now, what do you mean by Sanatanis? High class conservative Hindus. Now, from earlier time, Hindus, okay, high class Hindus, they don't want to see themselves with the Dalits. आप जानते होगे, like Indian society were divided into four castes: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishyas and Shudras. So Brahmin and Kshatriyas, they don't want to merge with the Shudras. So high class Hindus जो थे conservative, we call as Sanatanis. So if Congress support to the Dalits, then they may lose a support from Sanatanis. But Gandhiji thought कि we want a Dalits or every Indian should be united. And that's the reason Gandhiji called Dalit as a Harijan. Harijan means children of God. And Gandhiji believed the Swaraj would not achieve or Swaraj would not come for hundreds years if the untouchability was not eliminated from India. So Gandhiji want to eliminate the untouchability of India, and for that Gandhiji started a number of movement, like Gandhiji started temple entry movement. Gandhiji also thought that each people should allow to use the public facilities like wells, tanks, road, school, everything should be allowed. And Gandhiji himself started cleaning the toilet for dignity of sweepers or dignity of bhangis. So Gandhiji thought that Dalits should be a part of movement, but other people of Congress, they were not giving too much attention to the Dalits because they were having a fear that if they will give attention to the Dalit, they will lose the support from Sanatanis. But later on, the one of the important person came in for the Dalits, and the entire scenario was changed. That is, the Dalit demanded reserved seat in educational institution, and the Dalit also demanded for the separate electoral. And the important leader of Dalit, his name was Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Bhimrao Ambedkar. Bhimrao Ambedkar, he united all the Dalits into the one head under the one association called as a Depressed Class Association in 1930. And he also demanded the separate electoral. So as separate electoral started, so it was very difficult for Indian government or for the INC, for the India to achieve the Swaraj. When the British government decided to admit the Ambedkar's demand, so Gandhiji decided to went on the hunger strike. Britishers were ready to give the separate electoral because British want to divide and rule. You know the policy, divide and rule. So to divide, British were ready to give the separate electoral. But Gandhiji went on the hunger strike, and Gandhiji believed that the separate electoral seat, that Dalits would slow down the process of nationalism. So Ambedkar ultimately he has to accept the position of the result, and due to that reason Pune Pact was signed in 1932. Or according to this Pune Pact, the depressed class, they get the reservation seat in the provincial assembly and in the central legislative council. Like in depressed class, the reservation were given to the reservation is given to the Dalits, especially in provincial and central. Apart from that, Dalits also got the reservation in educational institution. Next is the second group who did not took part in this one, that is called as a Muslims. Now, what was the basic reason behind of Hindu-Muslim clashes? Some of the Muslim political organization in India, they rarely participated in civil disobedience movement, because when the Khilafat movement was started, like non-cooperation movement, then many Dalits they supported, same way many Muslims they supported. But during these two movement, the people Muslim thought they were Muslim felt they were separated from Congress. They were separated from Congress. They were not giving that much of attention by the Congress. So Muslims they started forming their own association. They started establishing their own parties, and from the mid 1920, the Congress came to be more visible or associated with the Hindu religious nationalist group called as a Hindu Mahasabha. So Muslims were started feeling they are separated because INC they started giving too much importance to the Hindu Mahasabha. Whereas in 1930, Sir Muhammad Iqbal, we call as he was a president of Muslim League. Sir Muhammad Iqbal, the president of Muslim League, demanded the importance of separate electorals for Muslim. Same way for Dalits who demanded B.R. Ambedkar. Same way for Muslims, the Sir Muhammad Iqbal he demanded a separate electorals. But the only difference between the Congress and Muslim League was a representation of future assembly that to be elected. Okay, now the another important personality that is Muhammad Ali Jinnah of Muslim League, he want to willing to give up the demand of separate electorals for two conditions. The Muslims said like we don't want a separate election in two conditions. Number one, like we should get the reservation seat in the Central Assembly, and second that in the Muslim dominated areas are there where we should get the more seat as per the proportion of population. Especially two areas were there, Bengal and Punjab. So in these two reasons we should get the more seat in the assembly, in provincial assembly, and in the central assembly we should get the reservation seat. But this all the discussion was waived off when the all party conference organized in 1928. At that time, M.R. Jaikar, the member of Hindu Mahasabha, he strongly opposed the effort and compromise of Hindu Mahasabhas. Okay, the Hindu Mahasabha they strongly opposed the Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Muslims' demand of the separate electorals, even the reservation seat in the Central Assembly. So question arise. So so Muslim were not ready to give up, and MR Jaikar and other Congress leaders they also don't want to give the things, and that's the reason that no solution came to known, and that's the reason the country is divided into two parts in 1947. One is called India and second is called Pakistan. So this is about the module number 4, and module number 5 that we have to discuss regarding the sense of collective belongings. Okay, thank you.